All right, last time we left off with JFK. JFK had been assassinated. Now the next president's going to come in. It's going to be Lyndon Baines Johnson. We're going to refer to him as LBJ just to make things a lot simpler. As you can see here, he's on Air Force One with Jackie Kennedy, and he's being sworn in as president. The president at that point in time had already passed away, and they're loading him up on Air Force One to be buried. Now, a couple things about his background. He is a senator from Texas, so he being that senator from Texas was able to bring in a lot of votes for JFK in the state of Texas. And the South views LBJ as one of those good old boys, and they will support JFK even more in the 1960 election because of him running as the VP. And as you can see, this picture here was taken November 22nd, 1963, and that's when he became president. Now, LBJ could be a very controversial guy. Many people in the South viewed him as that very good old boy type of lifestyle, and he's going to go out there and do something completely opposite once he becomes president. He's going to be very liberal. He's going to use the government, impact the lives of a lot of Americans. And in the South, a lot of people were still very conservative, very racist. And as we know, he's going to be big on the civil rights movement. Now, Johnson is a very tall man, and he would hover over a lot of people. And so when he wanted something done, he was known for giving people what they called the Johnson treatment. He gets all up in your face, he grabs your hand, he squeezes it about as hard as he can, and says, I need you to get this done. And people responded maybe out of fear, maybe out of loyalty, maybe out of whatever. But Johnson used this treatment a lot of times. And another thing that Johnson was able to do with his Johnson treatment, he could go up to you and say, hey, if you don't get this done, then you're betraying JFK's legacy, and they wanted to build a legacy together. Now, next year, LBJ has to run for re-election. Now, that 1 year that he served underneath JFK's term will not count because he did not serve the majority of it. If you go back to the amendment process in which they changed everything, it said that presidents can only serve up to a maximum of 10 years. So that means 2.5 terms if you took over somebody in the middle of their term. So saying that, LBJ can run two more times, one including this one and one including in 1968 if he wishes to do so. His opponent will be Republican Barry Goldwater. Now, Goldwater is going to capture a couple states, but as you can see here, this is a landslide victory for Johnson. And so Johnson could really focus on what he called the Great Society. The Great Society was nothing more than a bunch of programs, much like the New Deal programs, that went out there and tried to make life better for people. And this was a huge goal for him. He wanted people to remember his legacy, much like they remembered FDR and his New Deal. And he's going to go out there and he's going to tackle problems in poverty. He's also going to tackle problems in education. And he's really going to get America to a better standard in many ways. Now, a lot of people do not like his programs. A lot of them say he went too far, gave too many people welfare, different things like that. And we're going to see some of these programs here in a minute. And as we know from the last lesson, that he really did a lot for African Americans in terms of getting them those civil rights and also making sure that they can go out there and have equal protection underneath the voting rights. So let's look at some examples. I got 3 of them here, and we'll talk more about some other ones because he does some other things as well. Medicare. Medicare is basically making sure that elderly people can get assistance. And once you get a certain age, this is pretty much automatically given to you, especially if you cannot afford it. But then what about the younger people who can't afford any type of insurance or any type of medical care? Well, that's when Medicaid comes in. That is going to provide medical care for lower income families. We see a lot of this today. A lot of people have mixed feelings about this, and things have changed even further in our time where now it is required for every American citizen to have some kind of a form of health insurance. And then we got the food stamps. Food Stamp Act is a pretty good idea because a lot of Americans at this point in time could not afford to put food on the table. Now, I've heard a lot of controversial things about this. Me, as growing up, we received food stamps. And that was because we didn't try or anything like that. We were just poor. And every time we tried, something would happen. And, it didn't help that the families that I grew up in wasn't always spending money wisely, but at the same time, it did help. And I'm not going to knock anybody because I understand their struggle. So the other thing that we probably need to add in here is Head Start. Head Start did not exist until Great Society program introduced it. Another thing also, people couldn't afford housing. So we had the HUD House Act come out, and this made sure that Americans can go out there and buy affordable housing. Maybe they having to live in an apartment or something like that. A lot of these HUD houses are going to be built underneath London Johnson. And so the Great Society is like Johnson's great wife. He loves her, but he just has to go out there and mess around with something else. And that something else, that mistress that's going to ruin his marriage, is going to be the Vietnam War. Now, I'm going to go over the Vietnam War just in brief detail because the next section in our course is going to be Vietnam. So I don't want to hit on it too much right now because considering most of your testing materials on this next test will not cover Vietnam, but the one after that sure will. So that's when we're going to go over it really heavy. Now, as we talked about before, this is the Cold War, and people are really afraid of that domino theory. And that is pretty much, we've all played dominoes. Well, at least the type of dominoes where we line them all up and we hit that first one and we watch that last one eventually fall. And this was what Americans were afraid of when it came to communism. That first country falls, and then the next one, and the next one, and then eventually us, because we will be the last domino. Then we have the Gulf of Tonkin resolution. This pretty much, I'm not going to go into too much detail about what it was right now. We'll do that next week sometime. But what you need to know about this one right here is that it gave the president more war power than he ever had, or any president ever had at that point in time. He could pretty much make decisions on his own because of that. Now, Johnson will not stay out of Vietnam. He will actually be the first president to send in American soldiers to Vietnam. And a lot of people are going to wind up getting killed. And we're also not going to have a Selective Service Act, but we will rather have a draft. In a draft, the average age was around 19. Some people say it's a little bit lower, but most of the people that are going to be soldiers, at least fighting soldiers, we're going to see a high rate, percentage wise, of minorities and lower class people. And one thing that LBJ did not anticipate on, a lot of college kids, a lot of protesters coming out protesting, and we'll go more in detail about this next week sometime about how these protesters did not like the war. And we have a very famous quote here. I left out a word. I'm going to let you guess what that is, but it starts with an F and it has four letters. And it goes somewhere in here. Actually, no, it has an ing on the end as well. Hey, hey, LBJ, how many kids did you kill today? And then we have 1968. LBJ was supposed to run for president again, and then we have a couple bad events happen. I'm not going to go into too much detail right here what the Tet Offensive is, but the only thing you need to know is we weren't anywhere close to winning the war, and it made the government look really bad. It made LBJ look bad, and so Johnson gets on national TV to the surprise of everybody and says, "You know what? I'm done. I'm not running again. Someone else can have it." And so we're going to look at some of the positives of LBJ's presidency. First positive, civil rights. He got those African Americans their civil rights, and they've been built on since then. That is a good thing. Another good thing, he's going to make sure that elderly and poor people are going to be taken care of or at least aided in some kind of way, whether it's through food stamps, whether it's through Medicaid, Medicare, whatever the case may be. And then we're going to go to education. And we're going to see him go in there and say, we need to get our kids learning a little bit quicker. Go ahead and start at pre K. They can't afford to go to pre K. We'll find ways to make sure that they can. We're also going to make sure that they have proper housing, different things like that. Now, he will increase government involvement. And a lot of people will say, you know what, that might be a negative thing. So that was kind of like in the middle. And you'll see why on the next slide. We even have a comic book about the Great Society, particularly with LBJ. He's flying around like Superman. He's got his LBJ belt buckle on, his little super LBJ, and he's pointing down at Americans saying that could be a great society. However, though, the Great Society has a kryptonite. And as you can see, that kryptonite is Vietnam. Vietnam is his kryptonite, and this is going to be one of his negatives. Once he started escalating the war, it was pretty much over. There was no way in the world that LBJ was going to become a popular president. People do not like wars, particularly wars that they cannot understand. A lot of people are wondering why in the world are we over there, and he just keeps spending money. I mean, we're talking about billions of dollars. It would be trillions of dollars today. And a lot of people had so many problems with President Bush because of money he spent in Iraq and Afghanistan. And so this is going to be leading up to that next negative, spending all that money. You can't fund a great society and Vietnam at the same time. You either do one or the other. You can't go around and mess around on your girlfriend with your side chick and think that everything's going to be okay. Sooner or later, you're going to get caught. You're going to have to face the music, and then you're probably going to get smacked by both of them. And that's what happened to LBJ. LBJ was in a terrible situation, and he decided to try to play both of them, and it didn't work. And then, of course, that's going to lead us to our increased government involvement. That increased government involvement is pretty much a negative thing. You know, a lot of people say that the government has too much power. Then other people say the government needs more power. So I'm going to let you decide on that. And that will pretty much conclude a very short chapter, which will probably have somewhere around 30 questions on the test, but a lot of it's been covered in these videos. The notes are going to be uploaded, or they are already uploaded actually. So check them out. Work on that. Work on any assignments that you need to work on. If you need anything, you know how to get up with me by this point in time. A lot of people still, you're way behind, and I'm afraid that you may have to take this course again. I'm hoping that some people just gonna get on maybe that last week or two and just miraculously complete about 45 to 50 assignments, because that's probably where we're going to be at when this is all said and done. It might even be more. So I need you guys to get some work done. I care about you. I care about each one of you. You should know that by now. And I'm very easy to work with. So if you need anything, get up with me. I'll help you out. And that's pretty much it. So take care.